benefited, I'm sorry, I can't talk, how they benefited fish, what did they do to support the fishery, can we restore those, and what might we hope to get from that? Could we actually increase abundance, or are we just maintaining status quo? I mean, we need to understand what is possible and then how certain we are in that. And once flow functions are identified, the toolbox of methods for restoring those functions can be identified and discussed. We also hope to highlight that the report acknowledged there's uncertainty in flow as a predictive variable, and specifically the report pointed out that it's not clear how much weight, for example, to place on the new studies versus the older studies when aspects of the system were different. And this is compounded by the uncertainty in the accuracy of the summary indicators, and the ability to use indicators is in turn complicated by the incomplete understanding of the types of variability in flow and how they affect the system. And then all of those uncertainties, along with the complexity of the system and uncertainty about climate change, combine to create fundamental uncertainties about the value of flow as a predictive variable. And we think this is an important takeaway message, and also being consistent with many of the statements made by the expert panel in the 2010 flow proceedings, where they testified that they couldn't say that there is a flow that they could propose where you would actually have a measurable increase in species abundance. And we think it's important because it's probably a suite of actions that would be required, and that would be the fifth point. The report posed a question: how do various stressors contribute to the overall ecosystem status? The report observed that some fish species have declined while others have increased during the same time period, and that you need to look at multiple stressors to try to get to the bottom as to why that might be the case. So in closing, Dr. Bernstein's report we thought was a very useful first step in summarizing the information presented during the workshops. For practical reasons, it didn't go into the level of detail that we might have hoped, but it's certainly a good first step, and we would encourage the State Board to finalize the report. We would further encourage and support the State Board in distilling down the issues and determine where there's the interface between science and policy, and within the scientific context, drill down into the data and the details of the published literature and truly understand whether and to the extent there are scientific disagreements. Thank you.
Thank you. And feel better. Debbie Webster, and then our last card is Valerie Kincaid.
Is this one on? Good morning, Chair Marcus and board members. My name is Debbie Webster. I am the Executive Officer of the Central Valley Clean Water Association, and we represent over 50 wastewater treatment agencies in the Central Valley, which cover more than 80 treatment plants. So with that as a background, I just want to let you know, we met yesterday with the executive officer and other executive staff at the Central Valley Regional Board to talk about nutrients and nutrient objectives. And I would say two take-home points of that meeting that I think are pertinent to you is, one is really the need to coordinate both with the State Board and Region 2 in developing that. And I heard that today, but I just want to emphasize, we will need to coordinate. We need to make sure we don't do this twice, and we do it right. So that was one. And then the second thing in the Central Valley, which really hasn't been covered yet, and I know will probably be covered in the future, is we need to fund this. The Central Valley work really doesn't have a lot of funding right now to get it started. And so there's a little bit, but it's going to take a little bit more of an effort, and we don't have those resources right now available. So we're starting that discussion, but as touchy as the subject of that is, I need to put it out there. As a stakeholder in representing over 14 of the 15 POTWs in the Delta, I would say that Civica would like to be a member of, or like to be a stakeholder in the development of the workshops that we've been talking about for nutrients. And then also, finally, I just wanted to let you know, I appreciated the suggestion to hold a workshop for adaptive management. Working through a lot of different regulatory processes, it does mean different things to different people. And it's so important that there's a common understanding and common goals as we move forward, and we just don't throw that term around and then have unintended consequences. So with that, thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Ms. Kincaid.
Valerie Kincaid, excuse me, San Joaquin Tributaries Authority. Good morning, board. I want to thank you. The phase 2 process has been impressive. We participated in the phase 2 workshops, and from all aspects today, you've seen folks talk about collaboration, robust science, interagency cooperation and collaboration, and stakeholder collaboration. And I think really this is how the process is supposed to be done. I can't help but note that sitting in the audience, phase 2 process has not followed the same process. As many of you know, in 2009,
You meant phase.
yeah, excuse me, sorry, phase 1. In 2009, the phase 1 process was noticed and workshops were set. Workshops were then canceled and none were held, as many of you know. So with that criticism, I guess my comment would be that although taken out of order and perhaps a little cumbersome, my suggestion is that it wouldn't be too late to right the wrong and to have a phase 1 process be conducted in the same robust, collaborative manner. I think as we heard from the hearing recently on the phase 1 process, there's a lot of work left to be done, and certainly a process like the one we've talked about today would certainly help in either a recirculation or a amendment of the SED that's out there. So although it's a little bit, I don't want to say backwards, but out of order maybe, and not the typical way that one might proceed, we would certainly suggest that this process looks to be working. We thank the board for doing it, and we suggest that the phase 1 process be put back on track and follow a similar procedure. Thanks.
Thank you
Mhm.
very much. All right, that's the end of our speaker cards. This is very helpful as we think about how to proceed. We're not going to make any decision today. We'll be pondering the materials that you've brought in. And then the question I'm looking at, Tom, is should we, and Karen, should we, things can go on forever, and it's obviously quasi-legislative, and we'll still be talking about it until we decide what we're going to do, but do we want to say if people want to file any comments on what's been said today that they heard for the first time or saw for the first time, they should just get it, we'd advise they get it into us in 2 weeks so that we can focus? I'd like to just keep moving on this.
Yeah, that would be fine. 2 weeks for people to submit comments on what they heard today, and then we'll, I don't know how we'll do it exactly, but we'll roll out a process for moving forward from there.
Okay. Terrific. Any other questions, comments, Tam? I'm going to do procedure next.
I guess I hesitate to put my colleagues on the spot, but since we're not allowed to discuss outside of this forum our thoughts on these issues, I was wondering if any of my colleagues wish to share any preliminary, not final, thoughts on what we heard today. And with that, I will volunteer to go first. First, a question to Tom. We've heard a little, well, Tom or anyone from staff, we heard a little bit today, and I've heard from various stakeholders in other meetings about the concern of integrating our efforts with what's going on with BDCP, what's going on with the Delta Stewardship Council, and all that. And recognize that we do have an independent authority and an independent responsibility with respect to the Water Quality Control Plan and subsequent water rights action. What has been your, if you can provide a summary of your efforts and your thoughts on that integration or that coordination, I guess not integration, that coordination between these various efforts while still maintaining the board's independent authority and responsibility with respect to Delta actions?
So we're currently reviewing the draft BDCP and the draft or the administrative draft environmental document to determine how usable it might be for both the water quality control planning purposes and to determine whether there might be, whether it's adequate or needs more information for consideration of the change petition. So we're both evaluating that information to see how it fits into our process. At the same time, we're moving forward with our review, our comprehensive review, phase 2 review of the Bay Delta Plan and the scientific basis report that we're preparing to support that review. We're looking forward to see how you all direct us on next steps, but that hasn't stopped us from moving forward on those efforts. So currently, our thought is to look at these both together concurrently, and that we would, be looking at that information independently to determine whether it meets our needs or whether we might need more information and communicating that to the lead agencies for BDCP.
Great. And I'm not trying to interrupt, just to follow on that point. One of the things we talked about when Dr. Goodwin was up with Sam Heriter is, it would be good to have a map of all the science efforts going on and what's happening. So the question would be, can you all put that together, or should we just, since it is the Delta Science Program's charge, I'd like to ask them to give us that map pretty quickly so we have a sense of the state of play, including a summary of that predator workshop. I mean, it would be good for us to know what's going on in other houses. If you don't, there you are. Do you mind doing that? Because you probably have that chart somewhere. I mean, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be scientific and peer reviewed. It's just like, it's just like a matrix or something, that just the stuff that you know about, and then show it to our staff, and we can look at this so that we do have a full sense of what's going on in other fora. Because I hate being surprised when I find out we've been talking about something in here with a pretty robust or seemingly robust group of stakeholders, and in another forum, something really intense is going on, like the predator thing that nobody mentioned. So that kind of thing disturbs me.
Well, rather than assign it to the science program, we'll put together something working with the science program and discussing with the other agencies and make sure that the board gets the matrix that you're referring to in the next couple of weeks.
Terrific.
But
Terrific.
Tom, we were trying to exercise our authority and,
Until another
and to another agency and give
Yeah.
them a responsibility and hold them accountable. Tom.
Yes, who, when, what, yeah, I got it.
We're gonna get 13247 T-shirts made. I think that'll be sort of the next thing. Now, I don't want to interrupt Tam, but then I'll go to.
I was going to offer my thoughts on today, but if you have a point related to this, okay. I just want to thank everyone for participating today. Especially Dr. Goodman and Sam. I really appreciate your suggestion, and I mean, obviously, it's my initial thought, and I look forward to hearing staff's thoughts on this at subsequent debriefings. But I think it's an excellent recommendation in terms of using the Delta Science Program independent review process, and especially the timing in terms of getting the panels formed, getting the discussions going, and providing your reports back to the board by summer or fall of this year. I think that's obviously going to be very helpful to the staff in going forward and doing our environmental document and proceeding along the pathway of completing phase 2 in 2014 as we've projected. I strongly, strongly recommend and hope that we maintain that path moving forward, and the suggestion by the Delta Science Program, I think, is going to be very helpful in that area. Ms. Kincaid is still there. I appreciate your comments also, Valerie, but I think we all recognize, again, in the spirit of adaptive management, we all recognize that when we do phases 1, phases 2, when we do these efforts, we continue to learn and we continue to develop new processes and improve our methods as we go along. But that does not mean that with every new thing we learn, we go back and redo what was previously done. So I would not, I would be very cautious and would not support going back and redoing phase 1 using the framework that we've developed, or at least that we're attempting to go down in phase 2. Without getting into phase 1, because that's not the focus for today, I only say that my preference is for us to continue to go forward, to wrap up phase 1 as soon as possible. And you've heard already my feedback in terms of the SED and where we go from there. But I think, again, given what we've heard today, especially the comments from Peter about, and others, about there is no need for delay, that there is adequate information for us to proceed. And in fact, there's an opportunity for us to work with the Delta Science Program to improve some of the understanding and set forth an even better framework. And when I heard from David Guy and others about the efforts that they're working on in terms of developing projects that would hopefully feed into the program of implementation. I think there's a great deal of momentum, a great deal of interest in moving forward in these areas, and I think we should take advantage of it, and we should finally keep going and get to completion of the water quality control plan phases 1 and 2 as proposed in our work plan.
Anything?
I'm just wondering when this might come back again before us, and think that it might be helpful to calendar it to get information on when those workshops are going to actually take place, because it seemed there was a little bit of uncertainty because of summer schedule and all that, just as a way to keep the process moving. Furthermore, after staff has a chance to consider the recommendation on a workshop for adaptive management, and anything we can do to help encourage groups other than Nature Conservancy and NACWA to move forward on that June 1 list on actions for flow and non-flow. Get it as robust as possible, and bring it back to us, not necessarily as, for final approval, but just as a way of keeping the ball moving forward in, by calendaring further review.
I think we probably will have the subject on periodically.
Yeah, we can bring
Yeah.
back information items,
Yeah.
almost every month on this, if
Yeah,
that's what the
good.
board would like us
Sure.
to do.
Good.
So certainly, we are going to have a discussion, a little further discussion of what are the next steps, and we could bring that back here. And of course, the June 1 date is something that we could invite the parties to come back and describe the projects that they feel are appropriate. So we'll work with the board members and with the parties and make sure we get this to you as often as, probably more often than you'd like by the time we're done.
Yeah.
Anything?
In terms of today, I heard there was several discussions of flow from several different sectors of the of interest groups, but I think all of them kind of touched on and would be a heads up to the science panel that is being put together, particularly on outflow and then internal delta flow issues, as making sure that relates to something, not just flow for flow. It really has got to relate to, and I was impressed with the idea of nutrients or invasives or other issues. So that may be a way of actually reducing the number of workshops that you have to do, or you may have to divide some workshops up. I was also, as you heard from my questioning, I ask you to think about the passage upstream issue, and is it a science issue? It may be a policy issue. But if it's a science issue that needs to be dealt with, to consider that one. I thought that was good. And I thought Richard's specificity was quite interesting. I'm going to go back and look at the past recommendations that we made and how we might make that more accountable. I thought that was clearly, in terms of adaptive management, if we don't do that, it won't work. On the issue of adaptive management, however, it seems to me that it's for us, it's very wrapped up in programs of implementation. It's very wrapped up in water quality issues. It's wrapped up in certainly historically in settlement kinds of activities. And so I'd say let's give some thought to how we want to understand that better. We did have that panel, which I loved, on the third day to deal with the various processes, DRERIP and SMART and all the different processes, which I think are very much adaptive management kinds of activities. In the end, I think it's going to be it's just going to be a call on our part as to what we trust is giving us the best information to go forward. So, but I do think if we spend some time on it now, we may not have to spend quite so much time on it in the future. And finally, I was struck, we talked about combat science. I actually think we don't have so much combat science as we have combat policies and we have combat law. And so if we're going to sort of try to dampen or diffuse or put to more constructive use the science role that we play, I ask the stakeholders to think in terms of being as constructive as possible about policies, because we cannot do something that only addresses one side or one group or one interest. It has got to be integrative. You all know best how to do that integration. We're very receptive and open to getting your ideas, but if it comes in from in a combat perspective, it's hard to hear it. So I just make that plea.
Yeah. Thank you. Great comments from my fellow board members, as usual. And, I guess I would circle back to staff's initial description of the purpose of today, which was to discuss some of the uncertainty to be resolved, and then what process we should use to delve into that challenge. And I just wanted to voice my support for the process that's being contemplated. I think a lot of folks have done some homework for today. I think it's the right path to drill down in these areas. And then I wanted to, build on Fran's comment there and just really acknowledge some constructive suggestions we've heard today. When we talk about the program of implementation in our different water quality control plans around the state, that's really, where the rubber hits the road and where you have a chance then when you revisit the plan to look back and say, here's what this process has really accomplished on the ground and the lives that were changed and the environment that was improved. So really, when I first was lucky to get this job about a year ago, I looked at the program of implementation much as Mr. Bruce Collins did, and I noted that kind of, it would be nice to do this sort of phrasing to it. No disparaging my predecessors, but that was sort of the tone of the water quality control plan then. I'm very supportive of a tone now that really, as a civil engineer, I like to see things planned and constructed and built, and then results evaluated. So plans are great, but the program of implementation is a great opportunity. And then that's that opportunity, I believe, very strongly, that we can collaborate across this full spectrum of interest that's here today. That we get together and decide, yeah, that's a good way to spend our collective resources to do that. But it will come with this, because it's a synthesized, approach, because we have to address all the functions related to the water resources. So, and then finally, so thank you for those constructive suggestions, and I'm supportive. It was an interesting point that Mr. Bob Kerr brings up, that the scientists should be mindful of about whether you're dealing with disagreements or really truly uncertainty. I think it's so important in this phase in history on these big issues, but also in smaller watersheds through the state, to really be honest, about what we can do, what we have done, and acknowledge where we're just disagreeing from an interest standpoint versus what really is an uncertain issue, and then how we can work together to resolve the uncertainty. So I will look forward to the distillation through these workshops of what's uncertainty and what's just disagreements and positions. But I want to encourage this collaborative effort. I think we can really accomplish so much. And so I encourage you all to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to thank people for the time they took. Obviously, there were some areas of agreement. There were some areas of disagreement that help illuminate some of the choices in front of us, and I'm just going to take it in and think about it because it's fairly complicated. But I want to thank people for spending so much time focusing not just on rehashing, which I was nervous that we were going to have a rehashing of sort of a miniaturized version of all 6 days of workshops where people just repeated themselves louder and slower or louder and quicker because they didn't have as much time. Or that people were just going to be talking long term. And obviously this is an ongoing thing. We keep updating these plans. It is kind of iterative in the largest sense. And so I'm happy that I heard a fair amount of things we can move on quickly that allow us to get to do our job. And yet some of the disagreements are worth, I think, thinking about versus just reacting to. So I encourage you in taking that 2-week window to reply to stuff you saw or to reiterate things, to do that in the fewest number of pages possible. That's really helpful. It's a more effective way to communicate if you're trying to get people to pay attention to what you're suggesting. Just me talking here. But I think that I would encourage you to do that because what we're doing right now is a thinking process of how we want to construct our next step. So thank you for really focusing on that. Thank you for focusing on short-term issues as well as long-term issues, and for combining forces so that everybody didn't just come up and repeat and instead just, I know there are people behind all of you, whether mentioned or not, and that was a very efficient use of our time. So we'll take it all under advisement, and you'll be hearing from us after we have a chance to look at what you've submitted and what you will submit in the future. Okay, as I said at the beginning, we're going to take a short break now. I'm going to see if we can, we have 2 more agenda items. I'm going to look at my colleagues to see if it's possible for people to go get a snack in 15 minutes, and then we can not take a lunch break, because I don't think we're going to be going all afternoon unless somebody thinks I'm crazy. All right? So I'm going to take a 15-minute break and bank on the fact that we may actually be able to be done in the very early afternoon. So come back at 25 of 12. That would be 11:35.